Good morning, brand DIYers. It's Mark here, and welcome to kind of a gray Wednesday morning here in Victoria. Perfect sort of time and space to talk about creativity because, as we all know, creativity thrives in situations where you don't have a lot of distractions like the surf breaking out there and the beach, even though it is pretty fun to live by the surf and the beach. Let me just see. Okay, we are on the air. I wanted to just make sure that my camera was on. And again, this is an interactive session. So if you're tuning into this, make sure that you start posting. Hey, Barbara, it's good to see that somebody's there. You got your sunglasses on your emoji. You're thinking brighter thoughts. It's an interactive session, and it makes it way more fun if you interrupt me all the time and post your questions, because I feed off of that kind of stuff. I do have a structure here, but I do feed off of your comments and your feedback. So let's talk today about building creativity into your organization. Hey, Ryan, good morning. Now, I have personally been involved in quite a few ventures in three big, oh yeah, Barbara said you mentioned beach. Thank you. I've been involved in three big ad agency overhauls. So ad agencies are supposed to be these marquee places for creativity, but like every other business, there are creative ones and there are not so creative ones. And I was pulled in on three agencies as the turnaround guy. And as a creative turnaround guy, your job is to make a non-creative agency creative. I've also been involved in a number of projects with entrepreneurial clients who wanted to just up their creativity. And I find this happens the most in companies where the founders have come up with the big idea, and then they hand over their business to managers, and the managers are mandated with optimizing and making more efficient the processes and the ideas that already exist. So what you have a big idea that is honed and tuned and refined, while there is no more big ideas happening because they said, we've got our idea. And the founder might have gone away, they might have cashed out, or they might be in charge of teams and culture now. So they might not be thinking as much about big ideas, and they've put managers in place. And the managers, because that's what they're mandated to do, focus on honing and optimizing, not creating ideas. So I get pulled into organizations like that where they go, we have lost our idea capital. We have forgotten how to have ideas. And you would be surprised how many businesses where you think this is a very creative business, they come to me and they go, we've lost our creative spark. We don't know what to do. Can you help us? So I do have quite a bit of experience doing this kind of thing. And let me start off by saying that if any of you out there are going, yeah, this is going to be interesting, but I'm not creative, I want you to throw that notion out the window right now, because I have never worked in a situation with someone who is not creative. Everybody is creative. We have people like fish and birds. Some are good at swimming, some are good at flying. Some people are good at this type of ideation, some people are good at that kind of ideation. There are people who are great at analyzing ideation, going, this is on strategy, this will work, it might work better if we do this. There are people who just blue sky, just the dreamers and the designers, but everybody I've ever met is creative. And so just throw the notion out the window right now that one of the big things to have a creative company is that you have to hire creative people. A lot of people, most people, all people have creativity in their hearts. It's just been suppressed. So that brings me to the first condition of creating a creative company, and that is desire and recognition. And this is a really big one. I have never met a founder or a company head who said, nah, we don't want to be creative. Everybody says, yes, we want to be creative, because it's a really sexy thing to be. Everybody wants to be thought of as creative. However, when the rubber hits the road, and when you actually start to call their bluff and say creativity means you're going to have ideas, You're going to push ideas forward. You're going to champion ideas. You're going to take risks. Instead of optimizing something to death, you're going to come up with a new thing. That's when you start to see folks' true colors. And they go, maybe next year, maybe later. It's the same thing in all of us. It's a very human response. We all think we want to live more exciting lives. We want to go travel. We want to climb mountains. And then somebody comes up and says, hey, I'm going mountain climbing this weekend. You go, the football game is on. I'll go next weekend. It's a very human response. So I say the number one condition to creating a creative company is you have to have the desire. And not just the desire, nodding your head desire, but desire, yes, I'm going to follow through on this desire. It's like a habit. You have to keep doing it. And sometimes it's going to be messy. And sometimes you're going to go, oh, I wonder if I should have done this. But you have to stick with it. So that's the first condition of creating a creative company. I bet that's not what you were expecting. You were probably expecting tools and Sharpies and Post-it notes and stuff like that, but it's not. It is desire. It's a very human thing. The second condition for creating a creative company is time. Now, here's where I want to go into an interesting approach. I mentioned at the very beginning that everybody is creative. There are creative thinkers who tend to think in terms of generating lots and lots of ideas. And there are analytical thinkers who tend to think in terms of, here's the problem, and I'm going to work through the solution until I finish. So that's analytical, going from top to bottom, from start of the problem to the end solution. There are also, like I said, the lateral thinkers, the folks who generate lots of ideas. Now, time is important because in a traditional company where you've got a lot of analytical thinkers, you assign them a problem, they work through to the solution. It is very easy to put a timetable on that problem to solution process because you do it again and again and again and again. And you get the tools and you figure out how to get this done properly. And then it's just rinse, repeat, like working from the top of the ledger to the bottom of the ledger. Not so with creative thinking. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term lateral thinking, but here's how it works. If analytical or linear thinking works like this, it goes from here's the problem and keep working to the solution in a very linear focused path. Lateral thinking is like this. So it's almost like a plus sign or a T. Analytical thinking, lateral thinking. Lateral thinking, you start with a problem, same problem as our analytical thinker had, but instead of just going, okay, here's the solution and I'm just going to work through it, you go, how about this could be a solution? Yeah. Or that could be a solution. Or that could be a solution. Or that, or that, or that, or that, or that, or that. That's the whole trick with lateral thinking, is to come up with multiple possible solutions to a problem. Then you hone down the solutions and say, this one will work, this one will not work. Then you put the analytical people in charge again and go, okay, we've nailed down the solution we want to chase. Now, execute. I mentioned time as the condition for making this happen. Here's why you need time. Susan, Whack Pack. Hello, Susan Chambers. Creative Whack Pack, Innovation Whack Pack. Wait, there we go. These are invaluable tools. I'll come to those in a second. You need time for lateral thinking because of the way the brain works. If you're given a problem and you say, come up with 50 different solutions, it doesn't pop out. It's not like you can follow a template. Tools like the Creative Whack Pack say, would a solution look like, let's take something out of the equation? Would a solution look like, let's add something to the equation? Would a solution look like, let's turn the picture upside down? So the Creative Whack Pack and tools like this can greatly accelerate your lateral thinking. However, it can only go so far. What you also need is time. And you need the time to do what you always see in the Hollywood movies when you see creative thinkers. Put your feet up on the desk and stare out the window. That isn't being lazy. What it is, it allows your brain to shift into another gear, take all the information you've dumped into it, and then try to fit the Lego blocks together in different and interesting orders. I've been working in this business now for 30 years as a lateral thinker. I have always been afraid that I would never come up with the idea. And generally, when I'm under a deadline, I can go to sleep at night and the idea will come to me in my sleep. And it's not some sort of magic trick. It's letting your brain calm down in order to let it come up with new configurations on the solution so that you come up with something fresh and new. You could have never done it if somebody put you on the spot and said, come up with an idea now. Back to my original point though, this takes time. In a company that is used to doing analytical thinking, if you start doing lateral thinking, you're going to start seeing a couple of folks in the office with their feet up on the desk or taking a walk or having a glass of wine or just having a nap. And what you're going to think is these people are sloughing off. These people are being lazy. Nothing could be further from the truth, but the human brain needs time to digest and to come up with interesting new solutions. So if you want to start a creative company, the first thing that you have to remember is it's going to look kind of freaky when people are taking time to come up with solutions. And if you say, no, this isn't working, I want to see people busy and productive and at their cubicle, forget about it. It ain't going to happen. So what we've talked about so far, desire and time, two critical elements if you want to build a creative company. The next thing that you need is space. If you are running a company where everybody is sitting in cubicles and they're isolated from each other, that is the creative equivalent of putting your headphones on. You might have a few geniuses who come up with ideas with their headphones on, but I have never seen anybody consistently come up with ideas again and again and again, working by themselves. It doesn't work. It does not work, especially if you have to ideate quickly. The only way to come up with ideas again and again and again and again is to collaborate. If you've watched Mad Men, you see the scenario. You have a writer, you have an art director. They both put their feet up on the table, stare at each other's soles of their shoes for a couple of hours. They come up with the idea. They go out for drinks, have Alka-Seltzer, have an idea, that kind of thing. But they work together. And that's not just because folks get lonely. It's because I can have an idea and I go, that's an interesting idea. But if I ping pong it over to you, you can go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't have that idea. How about I color it and twist it just a little bit by doing this? And then you ping pong it back at me and I go, oh, I never would have thought of taking my idea and doing that. But now that you come to think of it, what if we do this? And what happens is I call it the ladder effect. Somebody has an idea, then the next person ladders it up one and ladder and ladder and ladder and ladder. And very quickly, it's almost like freestyle. Very quickly, you can go from this one idea to a very, very cool idea just because you're collaborating. Back to my original point, you need space to do this. When I was working in an ad agency, every team, writer and art director, and today, writer, art director, technologist, and perhaps user experience specialist, they sit together in an office and they ideate. I'm not sure if anybody has seen the Beatles biography of their last sort of recording session, but they walked into the studio at 9 o'clock in the morning and they started to stare at each other and play. And one would have an idea, the other person would add to it, the other person would add to it, and suddenly, boom, there's Get Back, a hit song. And that's how it happens. You have to stare at each other in a space until the ideas start to flow and you can collaborate. So you need a space to do this. That space doesn't have to exist in your home. So you can see, for example, what I've got right here. I've got my analog desk. I've got a whiteboard wall right here to chart ideas. And I always have thousands of Post-it notes handy that we can hang all over the place. So I have got a space that is built for people staring at each other and having ideas. You might not have that. I'll tell you what you do have, Starbucks. Go to Starbucks and talk. Shoot the bull for a little while. Think about the idea. Look at the brief. Go, we have to come up with a solution. What about? And you can start to ideate together. So you need a space. And if the company that you're working for, the company that is your company, doesn't let people walk out the door to Starbucks because it's too noisy on the factory floor, it's not going to happen. All right. The next thing that you need in order to run a creative company, we've talked about the desire. You have to have desire. You have to have the time in order for the brain to articulate and formulate ideas. You have to have a space in order to do this, a safe space where people can collaborate, because collaboration is how you generate ideas every time, as opposed to once in a lifetime. The next thing you have to have, though, and this is where a lot of people who run companies go off the rails. They say, you want us to be creative. We're going to have a whole bunch of lateral thinkers, a whole bunch of yahoos throwing Post-its on the wall and wearing tinfoil hats and hanging pirate flags and drinking at lunch. And I can't do that. I got a business to run. Yes, the answer is yes. And the thing that most folks don't understand about creativity is that creativity thrives under constraint. There is a wonderful book out called A Beautiful Constraint. Everybody should buy the book, and you will understand how creativity, at least in a commercial setting, works. You need constraints in order to come up with good ideas. Here's what constraint looks like. Constraint means you have an analytical thinker developing a brief. This is the problem. This is the person we want to talk to. These are the solutions they're used to. This is what the budget we have to develop the solution. Here's when the solution has to launch. Here's how complex it can be, etc., etc., etc. Here's some backup evidence. Here's some history. Here's some that. A brief is a work of art unto itself. It can be the single best piece of creative inspiration you will find. Way better than a creative whack pack. You might find the headline, you might find the visual, you might find the whole idea for the new product in the brief if you have a sharp analytical thinker doing the brief for you. Very buttoned down process. So that, remember we talked about linear thinking like this, lateral thinking like this. Imagine the top part of the plus sign here is the linear thinker developing a brief. Then that person briefs the creatives or is one of the creatives, or God only knows how it works in your company. And the creative people can start doing lateral thinking. Here's an idea, 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 here's an idea. And then that's the end of the creative thinking. Then the analytical thinking comes back in down here. So you've got the top part coming up with the brief, the lateral thinking, and then the bottom part, which is vetting the ideas. Which one is on strategy? Which one can we make on budget? Which one is the most campaignable? Which one impresses people who have no clue what we're talking about? Which one will a 6-year-old understand? Which one will a 90-year-old understand? And what you're going to find is out of all those ideas, they start getting whittled down very quickly. And then the analytical part happens again. You say, this is the solution we're going to run with. And then it's a race to finishing the idea and coming up with the campaign. Discipline, beautiful constraint. You need constraint in order to have great ideas. If you don't start with a tight brief, good analytical thinking to start, the ideas are going to be all over the place. They're going to be a mess. And I have never met a good creative thinker, a good professional creative thinker who says, yeah, I'll just come up with ideas, because they know what they're doing is opening themselves up to subjective judgment, because there is no criteria for what's right and what's wrong. It's just people going, I don't like it. Come back tomorrow, see if I like it. I don't like that. And that's the problem we have with a lot of freelancers in things like Upwork and FreeUp and all those sites. People don't know how to brief a freelancer. So the freelancer comes back with a dozen logo ideas, and the person goes, I don't like any of them. What do you want? I don't know. Come back tomorrow. No creative in the world wants that. Every creative who's a professional creative wants the discipline, the analytical thinker. So you need discipline. All right, so we've gone through. You need desire. You need time. You need the space to collaborate. You need discipline. That is the analytical thinkers. Remember way back at the beginning, for those folks who weren't here at the beginning we said you need disciplined thinking. Everybody can be creative. However, some people are more analytical creatives. Some people are more lateral creatives. The final element that you need, and I think this is where management, because I know that people who are here in the meeting room today all run their own company. The final thing that you need support. Now, creative takes time. Here, Ryan has a question. So, how do companies find leaders who can appreciate these pillars but also focus on the business side of things? Sounds like we're looking for a Michael Jordan who was softer to Scottie Pippen. You know what? Let me tell you a little story. Um, when I went to Gray in Toronto, and I was the national creative director. And Gray was, we had a joke. It was Gray by name, Gray by nature. Gray was at the very bottom of the creative standings. And if you work in advertising, if you're at the bottom of creative standings, you get the bottom of all the clients. So I got pulled in to fix the company. And the first thing that I wanted to do was take a look around at all the people working for me and fire the people who weren't creative. I was counseled wisely by my CEO, and he said, don't do that because you're going to have a client disruption because the clients are used to working with certain people. And he was quite right about that. What we discovered, though, was that if you, like Martin Luther, say, this is my proclamation, this is what we are going to become. Remember, we talked about desire. We are going to become a creative company, and that is going to look like this, better creative product, time to create properly, space to create properly, analytical, disciplined thinking, and lateral thinking. What we discovered was that a lot of the people, the creatives and the management, self-selected themselves out of the equation. They quit because they knew that a new sheriff was in town and that a new wind was blowing, and they didn't have the chops. They had been at Gray because they were looking for a safe harbor in order to do nothing and get paid for it. So the answer to the question is people self-select themselves out of the equation. They leave the company if they see something that they feel is threatening, or they don't want to go along with the party. They don't want to build that new company. They will self-select themselves out of it. However, and this is a caveat, on the way out, a lot of these people will feel that their vision of boringness has been betrayed. And I had quite a few instances at this ad agency where people would do things that were nasty. And they would do them on the sly, and they would do it to trip up the creative process and to make this whole new habit we were trying to develop fall flat on its face. It's the equivalent of going on a diet saying, I'm going to feel good about myself, and your friend being jealous, and your friend saying, why don't you just come out for 25 beers? Or why don't you come out, we're going to go get 500 pounds of dessert. Come on, just once. That's the same thing, because your friend feels jealous of you, and they say, I don't want you dieting because then it's going to expose me as somebody who doesn't really feel good about themselves but doesn't want to diet, doesn't have the discipline, and they will do things to you. So the answer to your question is, if you have somebody at the top, you always have to have somebody at the top. This will never start at the bottom. Somebody at the top, the boss, who says, this is what we're going to do, and put Martin Luther proclamation, this is how we're going to do it. You will very quickly find that everybody gives lip service to creativity, but when the rubber hits the road, the people who don't want that will self-select themselves out of the equation. You have to be very alert, though, because oftentimes, like your friend who wants you to eat lots of desserts because they're jealous of your diet, they will try to trip you up. So you have to be on your toes, and it is a very hair-raising kind of experience. We're almost out of time here. Final thing that I want to talk about is support, and that's what I was just mentioning. In order for this to work, you need to have somebody at the very top saying, this is what we are going to do. It's not going to be easy, but we are going to see it through. It will never happen from the bottom up, because if the management or the boss doesn't approve of it, it will all collapse and it will be undermined by managers who find it much easier to stick with the status quo. So that's all the time we have today. I just want to go back again. How do you create creativity in your organization? You need to have the desire. And what I just mentioned, the commitment. You need to have the time, because lateral thinking doesn't work like start with a problem, work through to the solution. You can easily see what the template is, and therefore you can time it out. Lateral thinking needs a little time for the brain to rearrange and do new things and put problems together in new ways to come up with interesting solutions. You need space. No good creative, a professional creative or a professional thinker can do things on their own all the time. You need two people so that you can create the ladder effect, with starting with an idea, bouncing it back and forth to come up with a great idea. And finally, you need support. You need the top brass to say, this is what we're going to do come hell or high water. I don't care if we fall down. I don't care if it isn't efficient to start. We're going to stick with it. All right, so if you like this little workshop session, make sure you tell your friends that they should come along next week. We're going to have another one next Wednesday. As well, if you go to markstoiber.com, oh, wait, no, it's not on markstoiber.com yet, but I'm writing a story about how to build creativity into your organization. It'll be out next Monday. So check it out. It's basically going to be this, but done up in a blog post. I will also, on the Brand DIY site, have videos, this video recorded so you can go check it out. I hope all of you have a great day. Yeah, thanks very much for coming, Susan. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks for everybody else for listening in, and thanks for sending me your comments because, man, it makes it a whole lot more fun when I have collaborators working on creative sessions like this. Take care. Have a great day.